Hello everybody, in this video we are going to look at how I make my melodies and all my tips and tricks, because I am a melody kind of guy. This is one of my strengths in my productions. And so first we are going to have a look at this melody right here. This is from a track that I'm working on right now. It's going to be part of my album. So let's just listen to that section for now. Let's understand what's happening in that section here. So we have the bass line that is doing some changes in the root notes, and this is my first tip. If you're struggling to find some inspiration, if you're struggling to find a melody that fits your track, chances are you need some kind of chord progression in your track. To make a good melody, I think you need also a good chord progression, because when you make chord progressions, you get a feel of a story or some kind of development in the music. So it's easier for me to know where the melody could go if I know the next chord, if I know there's a chord progression going up or going down. So let me mute the other elements just to listen to the bass. So C sharp to G sharp, and in between these changes we have more notes to kind of tease in the next root note. So this is also a trick for you guys to make the chord progressions a bit smoother. For example, here I go from C sharp and then I insert kind of a transitional note. So in this case the E to go down to G sharp. And I do the same thing here to go back up. So before I go back up to C sharp, I change the note to B to make this smooth transition to the next chord. And already this gives some melodic movement in the music. And so now it's easier for me to find a nice melody because the track is already kind of alive, already kind of moving. And now another tip to find a melody is to have kind of a second melodic layer. And here in this track it is this plug here. So this is the next tip, to have another layer that kind of dictates the overall melodic atmosphere, the overall melodic vibe that the main melody is going to follow. And now, so with the chord progressions and with this melodic atmosphere, now I can try looking for a melody that fits the overall vibe. Now to write the actual melody, here's another tip for you. Before you actually start trying to write a melody, what helps me is to design a sound that I'm going to use for the melody, a sound that fits the sound texture, the soundscape of what I have already. And in this case, for example, I'm going for something a bit brighter and a bit softer, because so far the music, if I mute the melody really quick, let's listen to the whole track again. So in the track I can hear that there's a lot of things going on in the high end here and a lot of things going on in here. So I have some space left in this area, and this is where I want my melody to be, because I feel like there's something missing in here. And so that's why I want my melody to be a bit brighter, a bit softer, not too bright, not too edgy, because as I said, there's a lot of things going on in here. And so that's what I'm looking for in the sound design. So when you design your sound for your melody, try to make it fit logically into what you have already. When you design your sound for the melody, it's nice to have this contrast of sound design. So now when you have a sound that fits the overall soundscape, and so now you can play on your MIDI controller. When the sound fits your track, it's much easier to find a melody that actually fits. And this is how I ended up with these notes. And now to the actual notes of your melody. This is the next tip that I'm going to give you. If I'm zooming in here, you can see that the notes are slightly off grid. You know, here it's a bit earlier, here it's a bit later. And in here, I think, yeah, in here also a bit earlier. This is just to create a bit more liveliness to the track and to make it sound less robotic. And also, when you make a melody, try to avoid doing something like this. You know, where all the notes are hitting at the same time as the kick, like this. It's a good start, you know, the notes are fitting, the notes have some depth and some impact. But to make this melody sit more in the groove of the track, to make the melody feel like it's part of the track and like every element is playing with each other, it's much more useful to create a groove, but also with the melody. Because this melody here, if I play it on its own, it doesn't really have a groove. But if I put the notes in some kind of different way, I don't remember how it was, something like this. And now I play it on its own. I think it was here, sorry. It already has some kind of movement, right? And it already has some kind of groove. And this is what you want when you want to write a melody that fits into your track. You want to make it groove just like the track grooves as well, and find a melody that grooves along with it nicely. So when you make a melody, try to listen to all the elements in relationship to each other and try to see if they are really playing together. So it's not just about the notes, it's also about the groove. And also here another tip. You can see that here the melody is empty, right? There's no notes. Now it depends on what you want, but in this case here I think it makes sense to have just a couple of notes, and so it doesn't go up and down all the time and where it's not too many notes at once. Because this part here is asking for a bit of a smoother, flowy, slow feeling, if you know what I mean. And so that's why I have less notes going on. So that's another tip. Allow yourself to keep some space in between the notes. Also, it's a nice contrast to this plucky melody here. Because in this plucky melody, there are a lot of notes going on, and I want something that does kind of the opposite so that I can separate these two elements more nicely. And so these two elements can play with each other a bit more naturally. Now, with all of these tips and concepts in mind, we can head over another part to see the same methods, the same tricks in another context. Now let's look at this break part here. Let's review all the methods that I told you in the first part. So for this part, I started with the chords, the chord progression, with this arpeggio here that I put into a big reverb, so it creates this atmospheric pad. And now with this chord progression, I can already see where the melody can go, where the story is going. And so this allows me to think about the melody a bit more naturally. It's easier for me to build a story on top of these chords, a story on top of these chord progressions. So now it's easier for me to create a melody that follows this exact chord progression, this exact story that the chords are dictating. And here again, before I start to find a melody, I kind of thought about, okay, what sound do I want? And I wanted something like a trumpet, something like a saxophone. This is, I think, a preset from Serum. Yeah, here, this one. So now I have the sound, and now it's much easier for me to play together with the chord progressions. Wait, I'm here on my MIDI keyboard. So I just played around and recorded what I've played, and I adjusted all the notes in my piano roll. And again, we can see that the notes are slightly off grid, just to create a little bit of movement in the melody, like a human would play it. Because a human is never exactly 100% on grid. So this all makes it sound less robotic and more like the melody is actually alive. And you can also see another method that I used in the previous melody. The notes don't all have the same length. It doesn't follow the kick, the first hit of the bar. It has its own little groove in there. So it goes from long notes to little short notes, to long notes again. And what you can also see from the notes themselves, the notes are not staying just in one line, not all in one octave. It goes up and down a little bit, and overall it goes down. It follows the story of the chord progressions. So now you have a nice little brass solo in the break of this track. Now let's look at the third part in this track, just to give you some more examples on how I use all these little tips and tricks. First I'm going to play the part, and then we are going to look at the melody itself. Okay, I'm going to share with you how I found this melody in the first place. Let's listen to the part without the melody. And also mute this arpeggio. you notice there's some kind of slower groove on top of this fast high-tech groove. And what I did with the melody is to follow this groove with the notes. So if I play this melody on top of it, this helps the melody to really glue in together with the whole track and really make it feel like all the elements are playing with each other. And just like before, I have this fast arpeggio. So these are a lot of notes, and to make the contrast, the melody here has less notes. Just a little notes and a little bit of empty space in between, so that this melody shines through. Now this part here doesn't have any chord changes, chord progressions or any root note changes. The bass is basically just in C sharp with a little of groove notes in between. So how can you make a melody that tells a story if there are no chord progressions? How can you make a melody that doesn't really feel like a loop but still feels like there's some kind of development going on? And so for the first two patterns here, so we have this one. So what you can do is to just make a little change in this pattern. So in this case, I changed just the last note. So instead of going up, I'm going down. I think, as Hans Zimmer said, here's your question. So this is the question, and here we have the answer. It's really simple, but very effective. Now, obviously, this would be too simple to just copy paste it for this whole part here. And I would still want to make that melody develop over time and to kind of increase the energy, increase the tension a bit more. So I just kept this little pattern change, but I added some notes in the silence in between and at a much higher octave to create again more contrast, which means more tension. Also, the notes that are a bit higher are in a different groove, so it feels like there are two melodies that are kind of talking to each other. And I'm just following the same principle for the rest of my development from this melody. And I just gradually introduce more notes and make it a bit more chaotic to increase the energy, to make it seem like it's going faster somehow, or like the story is kind of building up to some kind of peak. So most of it is just following this concept of contrast that I've been talking about in one of my videos. That's it for now. I hope this video could help you. This time it was more of a simple video. I didn't really plan much on it. So yeah, feel free to leave some kind of feedback in the comments, or maybe if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer each of them as best as I can. And otherwise, see you in the next video. Bye bye.